Alright, so this time I have the CJ-6. No, the airplane CJ-6. Okay, now the real Nanchang CJ-6 is an indigenous Chinese design from the 1960s that owes its heritage to the Russian Yak-18 military trainer. It's a basic trainer aircraft for military pilots that kind of akin to the T-6 Texan in America. Now it's unusual in that it uses air pressure instead of hydraulics for brakes and some of the control surfaces. Real quick before we get started, I just wanted to mention that the HobbyView apparel store is open. Show your support for this channel with HobbyView branded shirts, caps, mugs, and more. Just go to hobbyview.myspreadshop.com. FMS's version of the CJ-6 has a 47-inch wingspan and includes features such as flaps and retractable landing gear. The PNP version just requires a radio receiver and your choice of a 4-cell LiPo battery. Parts are very well packed in the box. You could drop it off a building and not hurt the contents. EPO fuselage has a striking color scheme with non-glassy decals already applied. Same for the wings, which have panel line details and wingtip navigation lights. There is a wire junction box in the center, though it looks like the glue came loose. It will, however, make wiring up the receiver easier. Main undercarriage has plastic gear doors and a central flap. Control linkages are 2mm rods with Z-bends and plastic clevises. Perfectly fine for this size model. Front end has a nice simulated cooling fan that partially hides the brushless Outrunner motor. More panel line details on the fuselage with white parts left unpainted. Pilot figure is pretty decent and looks the part. I like the exhaust header detail. The open nose gear looks odd, but it's actually pretty close to scale. Rear of the fuselage has cooling air exits and navigation light. Magnetically held hatch is fairly large and allows easy access to the gory innards. Speed control uses the XT60 battery connector. And you get some complimentary Velcro for your battery. Speaking of the controller, the CJ-6 packs a modest 40 amp ESC, which gives you 600 watts to work with. I noticed a slight blemish on the paint of the rudder. And the plastic reinforcement piece also on the rudder was a little below flush, but it was all only cosmetic. Alright, assembly starts with mounting the horizontal stabilizer, which uses 2 long screws. Then install the elevator linkage. Well, in theory, the holes in the control arm were too small, possibly due to some paint. So I carefully drilled it out, which did the trick. The bundle of wires in the wing will need to be released, then fed through the fuselage. Where 4 more screws hold the wing in place. There is a multi-connector block for the navigation lights. Just be mindful of polarity. The air sensor probe is installed next. Just don't poke your eye out, kid. From my last breath, I stabbeth thee. But a drop of glue is also a good idea to keep it in. It's 2 pieces, one of which keys into the motor shaft. Then the prop, and the second piece. 4 screws clamps the hub together. Then finally a plastic hub nut, which has a hex driver, just don't over tighten. And notice an extra wire on the ESC connector. Could that be thrust reverse?
The nose gear connector will need to be plugged into the wing's junction box. She's alive! Is that a flap or an air brake? So I plugged an extra wire into a separate channel to test my theory.
Okay, so now I've got all the controls hooked up, and I decided to test a theory on that single yellow wire. So everything's hooked up, and I have indeed have the thing working. You can see it's about to chop my fingers off. And so I wired that channel to a separate channel, and so when I flip this switch, I don't know if you can see it here on aux 2, there, when I flipped aux 2 to reverse aux 2, now when I hit the throttle, it has reverse. Well, isn't that interesting? That was not in the manual. So this speed controller has reverse. So that should prove to be quite fun, if I do think so myself.
With that confirmed, I just needed to set up the proper control throws. And she was ready for flight. Hi, thanks for watching. Please take a look at the video description below for special HobbyView sales and discounts. Your purchases help support this channel. Happy modeling!
It's unusual that it uses air pressure for some of the hydraulics. Ah, crap, I screwed it all up. Repeat.